Hey everyone, back to the City of Ember, and of course a recap. We got to a really good part of the story in my opinion. Dune and Lena are down in the pipeworks. They found the little silver key in the small steel panel in the wall. They opened the door and slid it sideways, and inside they ended up discovering candles, matches, which they finally figured out how to use to create movable light. And then they came upon boats and paddles, like hundreds of boats. And they figured that that is going to be their way out of Ember, to put the boats on the water and to get out and escape that way. However, Dune and Lena went home, and Dune started packing for their journey. And he overheard outside some guards talking to Nami Prague about looking for Dune Harrow. And they want to find him because he is spreading vicious rumors. And Dune just realized that he needs to warn Lena right now. And that is where we left off. After discovering the room full of boats, Lena had come home to Mrs. Murdo's with the sound of the river still in her ears. It was like a huge, powerful voice roaring at the top of its lungs. Deep inside herself, Lena felt an answering call, as if she too contained a drop of the same power. She would ride on the river. She could hardly believe it. And it might take her to the shining city she had dreamed of, or it might drown her. What she had imagined before, the smooth, gently sloping path leading out, now seemed childish. How could the way into a new world be so easy? She dreaded going on the river, but she was ready for it too. She longed to go. She slept that night in the beautiful blue-green room, in the big lumpy bed with Poppy next to her. She felt safe here. Mrs. Murdo came in and tucked the covers around her. She sat on the edge of the bed and sang an odd little song to Poppy, something about rockabye baby in the treetops. What are treetops? Lena asked, but Mrs. Murdo didn't know. Oh, it's a very old song, she said. It's probably nonsense words. She said goodnight and went out into the living room, where Lena could hear her humming quietly as she tidied up. She was so orderly. She never left her stockings draped over the back of a chair, or her sewing spread out all over the table. Lena closed her eyes and waited for sleep. But her thoughts kept tumbling around. So much was going to happen tomorrow. The whole city would be in an uproar. People would stream down into the pipeworks to see the boats. They'd be excited, shouting and laughing and crying, packing up their belongings and surging through the streets. If they couldn't all fit into the boats, there would be fights. Some people might get hurt. It was going to be a mess. She'd have to keep her little family close around her. Poppy, Mrs. Murdo, and Dune, and perhaps Dune's father and Clary. Through it all, she would hold tight to Poppy so no harm could come to her. It seemed she had barely closed her eyes when she felt Poppy's hard little heels banging against her shins. Time to get up, Poppy chirped. She got out of bed and dressed herself and Poppy. In the kitchen, Mrs. Murdo was mashing potatoes for breakfast. How lovely, Lena thought, to have breakfast cooked for her, to hear water bubbling in a pot, and to find a bowl and a spoon set out on the table, and vitamins lined up neatly beside a cup of beet tea. I could live here forever, Lena thought, before she remembered that in a day or two they would all be leaving. There was a sudden banging on the door. Mrs. Murdo dried her hands and went to answer it, but before she'd taken 3 steps, the banging came again. I'm coming, Mrs. Murdo cried, and when she opened the door, there was Dune. His face was flushed, and he was breathing hard. He had a bulging pillowcase slung over his shoulder. He looked past Mrs. Murdo to Lena. I have to talk to you, he said. Right now, but... He threw a doubtful glance at Mrs. Murdo. Lena scrambled up from the table. In here, she said, towing him toward the blue-green room. When she had closed the door, Dune told her what had happened. They'll come for you too, he said. Any minute. We have to get out of here. We have to hide from them. Lena could hardly make any sense of what he was saying. They were in trouble? Her legs were shaky at the knees. Hide, she said? Hide where? Well, we could go to the school. I mean, no one would be there. Or to the library. I mean, it's almost always open even on holidays. He hopped impatiently from foot to foot. But we have to go fast. We have to go now. They have signs up about us all over the city. Signs? Yeah, telling people to report us if they see us. Lizzie felt as if a swarm of insects was inside her head, buzzing so loudly she couldn't think. Well, how long do we have to hide? All day? I don't know. We don't have time to think about it. Lena, they could be outside this door right this minute. The urgency in his voice convinced her. On the way through the living room, she gave Poppy a quick kiss and called, "Bye, Mrs. Murdo. We have some emergency work to do. If anyone comes asking for me, just say I'll be back later." They were down the stairs before Mrs. Murdo could ask any questions. Once in the street, they ran. "Where to?" Lena said. "The school," Dune answered. They took Greystone Street, staying within the shadows as much as they could. As they passed the shoe shop, Lena saw a white piece of paper stuck up on the window. She glanced at it, and her heart gave a wild jump. Her name and Dune's were written on it in big black letters. It said, "Dune Harrow and Lena Mayfleet, wanted for spreading vicious rumors. If you see them, report to the mayor's chief guard. Believe nothing they say. Reward." She snatched the poster off the window, crumpled it up, and tossed it into the nearest trash can. In the next block, she tore down 2 more, and Dune ripped one off a lamppost. But there were too many to get them all, and they didn't have time to waste. They ran faster. On this holiday, people slept late, and because the stores were closed, the streets were nearly empty. Still, they took the long route all the way out by the beehives to avoid Spark Swallow Square, where a few people might be standing around and talking. They ran past the greenhouses and up Deadlock Street. As they crossed Knight Street, Lena glanced to her left. 2 blocks away, a couple of guards were crossing to Greengate Square. She tapped Dune's shoulder and pointed. He saw, and they ran faster. Had they been noticed? Lena thought not. They would have heard a shout if the guards had seen them. They got to the school and went in through the back door. In the wide hallway, their footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. It was strange to be here again, and to be here alone without the clatter and chatter of other children. The hallway with its 8 doors seemed smaller to Lena than it had when she was a student, and shabbier. The planks of the floors were scuffed gray, and there was a cloud of finger smudges around the doorknob of every door. They went into Miss Thorne's room, and out of habit, they sat at their old desks. "I don't think they'll look for us in here," said Dune. "If they do, we can crawl into the paper cabinet." He set his pack down next to him on the floor. For a while, they just sat there, getting their breath back. They hadn't turned the light on, so the room was dim. The only light came from beneath the blind over the window. "Those posters," Alina said after a while. "Yeah, everyone's going to see them." "Well, what will they do if they catch us?" "I don't know. Something to keep us from telling what we know. Put us in the prison room, maybe?" Alina ran her finger along the B carved in the desktop. It felt like a very long time since she'd sat at this desk. "Well, we can't hide in here forever," she said. "No," said Dune. "Just until it's time for the singing. And then when everyone's gathered in Harkin Square, we'll go and tell them about the boats and the mayor. Won't we? I mean, I haven't really thought about it. I haven't had a chance to think at all this morning." "But the guards are always there at the singing, standing next to the mayor," said Lena. "I mean, they'd grab us as soon as we opened our mouths." Dune's eyebrows came together in a dark line. Yeah, you're right. So what will we do? It was like finding yourself on a dead-end street, Lena thought. There was no way out. She stared blankly at the things that had once been her daily companions. The teacher's desk, the stacks of paper, the book of the City of Ember on its special shelf. The old words ran through her head. There is no place but Ember. Ember is the only light in the dark world. She knew now that this wasn't true. There was someplace else, the place where the boats would take them. As if Dune had read her thoughts, he looked up. We could go. Well, go where, she said, though she knew right away what he meant. Wherever the river leads us, he said. He gestured to the pillowcase sack. I packed up my bag this morning. I'm all ready. I'm sure I have enough for you too. Lena felt her heart shrink a little. Go by yourselves, she said, without telling anyone? Well, we will tell them. Dune was on his feet now. He went to the cabinet and got a sheet of paper. We'll write a note explaining everything, like a note to someone we trust, someone who will believe us. But I can't just leave, said Lena. How could I leave Poppy and not even say goodbye to her? Not know where I'm going or even if I'm coming back? How could you go without saying goodbye to your father? Because, said Dune, once they find the boats, the rest of Ember will follow us. It's not as if we're leaving them forever. He strode across the room and rummaged in Miss Thorne's desk. Who shall we write a message to? Lena wasn't sure about this idea, but she couldn't at the moment think of a better one. So she said, well, we could write it to Clary. She's seen the instructions. She'll believe what we say, and she lives close by, just up in Torrick Square. Okay, said Dune. He pulled a pencil from the desk drawer. Really, he said, this is the perfect idea. We can get away from the guards and leave our message behind us. And we could be the first ones to arrive in the new city. We should be the first, because we discovered the way. Well, that's true, Lena thought for a moment. How long do you think it will take before the rest of them find the boats and come? It's a lot of people to get organized. She numbered on her fingers the things that would have to happen. Well, Clary will have to get the head of the pipeworks to go down with her and find the boats. And then she'll have to make the announcement to the city. And then everyone in Ember will have to pack up their things, troop down to the river, get all those boats out of that big room, and load themselves in. It could be a big mess, Dune. Poppy will need me. She pictured frenzied crowds of people, and Poppy tiny and lost among them. Well, Poppy has Mrs. Murdo, said Dune. She'll be fine. Really? Mrs. Murdo is very organized. It was true. The thought of taking Poppy with her on the river, which had darted into Lena's mind, darted out again. I'm only being selfish, she thought, to want to have her with me. It's too dangerous to take her. Mrs. Murdo will bring her in a day or two. This seemed the most sensible plan, though it made her so sad that it cast a shadow over the thrill of going to the new city. What if something goes wrong? She said. Nothing will go wrong. It's a good plan, Lena. We'll be there ahead of everyone else. We can welcome them when they come, and we can show them around. Dune was bursting with eagerness. His eyes shone, and he jiggled up and down. Well, all right, Lena said. Let's write our message then. Dune wrote for a long time. When he was finished, he showed what he'd written to Lena. He'd explained how to find the rock with the E, how to go down to the boat room, even how to use the candles. It's good, she said. Now we have to deliver it. She paused a moment to see if she had any courage inside her. She found that she did, along with sadness and fear and excitement. I'll deliver it, she said. I'm the messenger, after all. I know back ways to go where no one will see me. An idea struck her. Dune, maybe Clary will be home. Maybe she would keep us safe and help us tell what we know, and we won't have to leave right now. Dune quickly shook his head. I doubt it, he said. She's probably with her singing group, getting ready. You'll just have to leave the note under her door. Lena could tell from his tone of voice that Dune really didn't want Clary to be home. She supposed he had his heart set on their going down the river by themselves. Dune glanced up at the clock on the schoolroom wall. Well, it's a little after 2, he said. The singing begins at 3. After that, everyone will be in Harkin Square and the streets will be empty. I think we can get to the pipework safely then. Why don't we leave about 3:15? You still have the key? Dune nodded. So after I've delivered the note to Clary, I'll come back here, said Lena. Yes, and then we'll wait until 3:15 and then we'll go. Lena got up from the cramped desk and went to the window. She moved the blind a little and peered out. There was no one in the street. The dusty schoolroom was very quiet. She thought about Dune's father, who would be frantic when he saw his son's name on those posters. And then he realized later that Dune had disappeared. And then she thought about Mrs. Murda, who might already have seen the posters and who would be frightened if guards came looking for Lena and terrified if Lena didn't come home by nightfall. She tried not to think about Poppy at all. She couldn't bear it. All right, give me the note, she said to Dune at last. She folded the piece of paper carefully and put it in the pocket of her pants. Back soon, she said, and went out of the room and down the hall to the rear door of the school. Dune went to the window to watch her. He moved the blind aside just to see out into Pibb Street. There she was, running in that long-legged way with her hair flying. She started across Stone Grit Lane. Just before she reached the other side, Dune's breath stopped in his throat. 2 guards rounded the corner from Knack Street directly ahead of her. One of them was the chief guard. He leapt forward and shouted so loudly, Dune could hear him plainly through the glass. That's her! Get her! Lena reversed her direction in an instant. She raced back down Pibb Street, turned down School Street toward Babolio Square, and vanished from Dune's sight. The guards ran after her, shouting. Dune watched, sick with horror. She's much faster than they are, he told himself. She'll lose them. She knows places to hide. He stood frozen next to the window, hardly breathing. They won't catch her, he thought. I'm sure they won't catch her. And we are on chapter 16, called The Singing. When Lena heard the guards shout, terror shot through her. She ran faster than she ever had before, her heart pounding wildly. Behind her, the guards kept up their shouting, and she knew that if other guards were nearby, they would come running. She had to find a hiding place. Ahead of her was Babolio Square. Was there a spot she could duck into? And like an answer, Dune's words came back to her. The library. It's almost always open, even on holidays. She didn't have time to think. She didn't ask herself whether Edward Pocket would be willing to hide her, or whether there would even be a good hiding place to hide in the library. She just ran for the passageway that led to the library door and darted down it. But the library door wouldn't open. She turned the knob frantically. She pulled and pushed, and at the same time, she heard the running footsteps of the guards coming into the square. She saw the small handwritten sign stuck to the door, closed for the singing. The guards were very near now. If she ran, they would see her. She flattened herself against the wall, hoping they wouldn't think to look in the library passage. But they did. Here she is, yelled one of the guards. She tried to shoot past him, but the passage was too narrow, and he caught her by the arm. She pulled and twisted and kicked, but the chief guard had her now, too. He gripped her other arm with fingers that felt like iron. "Stop your struggling," he shouted. Lena reached up and grabbed a handful of his wiry beard. She pulled with all her might, and the chief guard roared, but he didn't let go. He yanked her forward, almost off the ground, and the two guards dragged her across the square at an awkward, lopsided pace that made her stumble over her own feet. "You're hurting me," Lena said. "Don't hold so tight." "Don't you tell us what to do," said the chief guard. "We'll hold you tight till we get you where you're going." "And where's that?" said Lena. She was so enraged at her bad luck that she almost forgot to be afraid. "You're going to the mayor, missy," said the chief guard. "He'll decide what to do with you." "But I haven't done anything wrong." "Spreading vicious rumors," said the guard. "Telling dangerous lies calculated to cause civic unrest." "It's not a lie," she said. But the guard gripped her arm even more tightly and gave her a shove so she stumbled sideways. "No talking," he said. And they walked the rest of the way in grim silence. A few people had already gathered in Harkin Square, though the workers were still getting it ready for the singing. Street sweepers crossed the square back and forth, pushing their brooms. Someone appeared at a second-floor window of a building on Gilly Street and unfurled one of the banners that was always displayed for the singing. A long piece of red cloth, faded after years of use, but still showing its design of wavy lines, representing the river, the source of all power. That was for the Song of the River. There would be a banner on the Broad Street side of the square too. This one, deep yellow gold, with a design like a grid to represent the song of the city. And another banner on the Otterville side for the Song of Darkness. Perfectly black, except for a narrow yellow edge. The guards marched Lena up the stairs of the gathering hall and through the wide doorway. They took her down the main corridor, opened the door at the end, and gave her one last push. A push that caused her to stagger forward in an undignified way and bump up against the back of a chair. It was the same room that she'd been in that other, much happier day, her first day as a messenger. Nothing had changed. The frayed red curtains, the armchairs with the upholstery worn thin, the hideous mud-colored carpet, the portraits on the wall looked down at her sorrowfully. "Sit there," said the chief guard. He pointed at a small, hard-looking chair that faced the large armchair. Lena sat. And this will be a good place for us to end today.